try and change things regularly so that you surround yourself and you open yourself up to viewpoints that might actually conflict with what you think is right. And then apply that mindset in which you think, hold on, what wasn't I seeing earlier? What this person is telling me. Don't think you're wrong, that's frustrating, but think, what am I missing? If you have the presence of mind to change it when you feel like, oh God, I'm starting to get wedged into this system and there's a lot of things that we're not seeing anymore. To then be able to say, let's mix it up, let's change it. That also trains a muscle for the rest of the team. Try to figure out what kind of CMO you want to be, what kind of role you're looking for, and then design the path to get there. Again, with the realization that you're basically relying on opportunities and the universe to fall into place. So it's more chance than design.
Welcome to the Global Marketing Leader. I'm Andrew Garrihy, a former global CMO turned executive coach for marketing leaders. This is the podcast where we get honest about what it takes to lead global marketing teams and to build global brands that grow responsibly whilst lifting the communities within which they operate. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Ivo van den Brand, former CMO of Too Good To Go. We talk about how he went from being the first employee at a small PR agency in Amsterdam to leading 160 marketers across 17 countries for the world's largest marketplace for surplus food. We unpack what it takes to scale a mission-driven brand from 50 million to 125 million users. How to lead through constant transformation and why resilience, humility, and hunger matter more than ever for global marketing leaders. If you are leading a team across markets, or you want to be a CMO at that level, this one will give you a very real view of the job and a lot of valuable tips to put in your own backpack. Ivo, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you for making your time to come and join us on the Leadership Edge for Global Marketing. Obviously, this podcast is dedicated to developing and growing better international marketing leaders, and you are one such international marketing leader. Now, obviously, you and I, we know each other quite well, and we've got a bit of history. But for listeners that, for some unbeknown reason, haven't come across you before, who are new to you, give us your 60-second career arc. Kind of give us the quick highlights on your key roles, kind of what you're focused on now.
Yep. And first of all, thank you very much, Andrew, for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure. It's always nice to see you again, let alone when there's other people present virtually. So until very recently, I was the global CMO for a company called Too Good To Go. I can explain what Too Good To Go does a bit later, maybe. And I would say that I'm probably not your typical CMO profile. So I didn't start in a generalist role and at an FMCG company that wrote the book on marketing. I started as the first employee of a PR agency in Amsterdam. So very much went into a PR career in agencies and then landed an amazing role of global head of PR at Philips, at a technology company. That is after 10 years, by the way, not 10 seconds, but still. And it was at that role where I realized, hold on a minute. I've got the coolest PR job in this company. I've got 40 years still to go. And marketing really doesn't happen in silos. So I wanted to really be involved across the whole marketing mix. So I had a one-on-one with the CMO at Philips. And I said, how do I get your job? And obviously not now, but...
That's a terrifying question for most CMOs.
He dealt with it really, really well, I must say. And what I really liked is he said, well, to be honest, you're quite a unique profile because you're such a functional expert and you know everything about PR and comms and social. So why don't you become a generalist by trying to collect as much of that expertise firsthand, put it in your backpack, and then when you've collected all of it, that's a different way of being a generalist. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. But how are we who's going to give me those jobs? And then he said, I will. So he then gave me an opportunity to build an in-house performance marketing team at Philips, which was super cool. It was also in the time when Facebook started really monetizing the advertising space. So that was a great opportunity. That then ventured into more involvement with the e-commerce side of things. And then I took his advice to heart and just started doing as many different types of jobs, pushing myself out of my comfort zone to just learn new things. So I joined a consultancy who were all about digital data, consumer insights. I moved into classic brand roles with some incredible leaders,
great
including Andrew Garrihy. And then I moved into generalist marketing roles. So I essentially spent 10, 12 years trying to collect as much expertise in other areas to ultimately become, most recently, CMO.
Wow, that's fantastic. I don't think I knew the story about that transition from PR. If I did, I'd forgotten. But I actually love your analogy about kind of stuffing your backpack full of experience from across the marketing mix. I mean, that's fantastic. And whoever that CMO was, bravo to him, because actually not many people get those kinds of opportunities to get that cross, kind of that breadth, that generalist breadth. So that's amazing. Amazing story. Lovely. So tell me a bit more about your most recent role. So you had all that in your backpack. What did you do with it?
Well, so I joined Too Good To Go, which was an unbelievable opportunity because I was a user of the Too Good To Go app. It's a mission-driven company. It's basically saving the planet. So to be given an opportunity to join a scale-up that A, does well, and B, has a super interesting growth trajectory ahead of it, it's a super big opportunity. As a bit of context as to what Too Good To Go does. So Too Good To Go operates the world's largest marketplace for surplus food. So what that means, because I appreciate there's not a lot of people who think about surplus food when they wake up in the morning. So if you imagine a local bakery, it's incredibly hard for that bakery to predict exactly what they're going to sell that day, both in terms of volumes and whether it's going to be pan au chocolats or pan au raisins. So inevitably, every day they end up with a lot of food that they haven't sold, perfectly good food. And they've got one resort, and that is throw it in the bin. They can't sell it the next day. So it's food wasted. So Too Good To Go created a marketplace where businesses like that bakery, but also grocery retailers, coffee shops, all sorts of different outlets that sell food, can list what we call surprise bags. So it's a surprise because you don't know whether it's a pan au raisin or a pan au chocolat. And they can list them on the app and sell them at closing time or at a time that they want at a discounted price. And then users of the app can look on the map and to see in the local areas where they can reserve and buy those bags, and then go to the store and pick up a bag of great food. So it's essentially what we call a win-win-win model, because the business gets to sell its unsold food and drive a bit of footfall. The users get good food at great value for money, and the planet wins because food waste is responsible for 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. It's a huge problem. 40% of all foods.
40%.
40%, 40. In a world in which more than 700 million people don't know where their next meal is going to come from. So it's
that's
really
shocking.
big
Actually,
problem.
that's sobering. I had no idea the numbers were that big. Wow. So that's Too Good To Go, which, incredible. As you hear that, you wonder why that didn't exist years before. It's an amazing idea. But tell us about your growth and how many countries, kind of how many users you got. What's your success been like, or what's the success of the brand been like in the last couple of years?
Yeah, so when I joined, Too Good To Go had already launched in a lot of markets. So they were founded in 2016. They were active in 17 different countries. So that's largely Western Europe and then North America. They had 50 million users, so 50. And they were really at that point where they realized we've launched all of these businesses. They were all of the local markets were all duplicates of the first one, all rolling out the playbook. And now operationally, it just breaks. The scale was too big. So we needed to essentially change the operating model, create a more scalable model to go to the next stage of growth. And that was kind of my remit. So it's quite a daunting task where it's like, hi, welcome to Too Good to Go. Please set us up for success in the future. I was there for 3 years, and I think you and I have both worked at scale-ups. It's quite an interesting place because when job descriptions say it's dynamic, I think when you worked at a scale-up, you realize what dynamic really means, i.e., whatever we did yesterday is not going to be good enough tomorrow, and what got us here won't get us there. Those phrases are really true because you are constantly recalibrating the expectations. You are constantly recalibrating what needs to happen. And it really is dynamic, which is super, super interesting. But you are driving 3 years of end-to-end transformation.
And that's, I love that point about in scale-ups, because you and I have done scale-ups, and we've done some of them together. And even though they're very big scale-ups, who are, it's not a small exercise. But how many marketers did you have when you started and when you made the transition?
So we had more than 160
distributed across the globe.
Distributors across the globe. Also because I think 99% of everything we did in-house. So that obviously then puts a lot of pressure on having people in-house. And then we changed the setup, which allowed us to create global centers of excellence. We moved a lot of things from local to global. We created global functions for performance marketing or growth marketing, whatever you want to call it, lifecycle management, partner marketing, a big in-house creative team as opposed to designer sprinkled across the markets. And when I left, after 3 years, we had grown from 50 to 125 million users.
Wow, that is astronomical user growth. Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Okay, I'm going to come back to the other point you made. You made a point about constantly having to recalibrate in that environment. I'm going to come back to that when we talk about leadership, because I've experienced exactly the same thing. I want to know what that means for your leadership style, about that constantly recalibrating, because you're never on solid ground, are you? You're always, it's like a dance, isn't it? You're constantly dancing. Yet with that user growth, that's incredible, right? So you did an organizational transformation, doubled your users, almost tripled your users actually, and transformed the organization in a high growth phase. Pretty impressive. Talking about those successes, which one is the most important to you as you look back?
I think going from 99.9 to 100 million users, that really felt a bit like oh my God, this is big. I mean, I've worked at big businesses. I've worked for companies with 200,000 employees, billions and billions in revenue, but 100 million users just feels like it's a big deal. And when we crossed that number, when you open Looker and from one morning to another, all of a sudden that number has gone over 100, that felt really quite special.
I want to come to that about did that change anything in the way you operated as a CMO? Well, actually, let me ask that now. That's a momentous milestone. Did it change anything in you once you made that move from 99 to 100?
Yeah, I don't think it did. It's kind of annoying because you wish. I mean, up to the point that we're having this conversation now, it's not like I'm thinking about this a lot. And I've always been quite forward-looking, and I think everything we talked about and touched upon with scale-up phase and the constant recalibration, you don't have time to look back and say, oh, that was amazing. Because you're constantly thinking about the moving target that's ahead of you, that is pushing you widely out of your comfort zone. And you're trying to think, how on earth are you going to manage that? So it didn't really. It just moved us to, okay, well, let's hit 110 and let's hit 150 and just new targets. But I think upon reflection, I think it's
they're big numbers. They're the big numbers. let's talk about leadership, because that's what we're here to talk about, right? So, you've had an impressive career. You've had some incredible results with Too Good to Go, and before that, I mean, the work you did when we worked together at Didi, but also the work you did at StorySign at Huawei was incredible, and you were always a great leader. But I'm keen to dive into your leadership style and your leadership edge and how you operated as a CMO at that scale, because that's a big role, right? Big number of users, a lot of countries, a lot of complexity in a very challenging marketplace with what I assume is pretty slim margins. So it requires some serious operational efficiencies. Tell me a bit about your leadership edge. What makes Ivo Vandenbrand a great international marketing leader, if you do say so yourself? And I can validate it because I know you.
Yeah, I'll leave the great to other
You're so
people
modest.
to judge. But
Always
I think if I reflect on how I lead, because it's an interesting question, right? It's not like you come to the office in the morning and think, today my leadership style is going to be X. It kind of forms over time and then becomes something. And if I really had to put a few words on it, I would probably describe it as equal measures of slightly more soft and human-centric principles. Like, I really care about building a connection with people. So that manifests through, I really want to listen to what people have to say. I really want to acknowledge people and their emotions and make them feel seen. And I also want to be vulnerable, and be very clear when I don't know what the answer is, or I don't know how to tackle something. So on the one hand, build a really genuine, true connection with people. I'm all in. Everyone I worked with knows my daughter, knows my partner's name. I've seen the Barbie Greenhouse in the background. I'm definitely an open book. So it's the connection on the one hand, and then also the commitment and the care. So I will always care as much as anyone else. And I think that's really important as a basis. And then I think on top of that, I try to lead with clarity. So if everyone knows I care and people can trust me and feel they can be open to me because I will do the same with them, to then consistently provide clarity and enable focus, then I think that's a really powerful place.
Okay. Great. So I'm hearing some pretty clear themes in there. So I hear, it feels, if I was to sum it up, it sounds like a kind of a very person-centric leadership style. And it's characterized by authenticity, transparency, clarity, focus, and genuine care for the people you lead and work with. And one other thing you talked about was kind of listening, really listening to the people you work with. Is that a fair summary of kind of your leadership style, this kind of person-centric approach?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a very good summary, actually. I should probably steal it. I've learned over time that integrity is a really important driver for me. No one had told me that. I kind of found out. I have a coach, and she kept telling me, I think integrity is really important to you. And integrity is about honesty and transparency and authenticity and trust, right? So I try to give it, but I also expect it back. I also think loyalty is a two-way street. And yeah, I think listening is so important for a leader, because if you truly listen, you're present. You're trying to understand where people are coming from, whether it's about something emotional, something they're struggling with, or something super, super rational, functional, and a problem that you need to solve. It's also it's the most rewarding way of going about your job, but also it's the most efficient way. Because if I'm not listening, then we're going to have that conversation 3 times in a different form. Or we're not going to have the conversation 3 times, and it's just going to be a really ineffective working relationship. I think listening is super, super important.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It took me a long time to learn that as well, actually. In fact, one of the things that I used to do, which I'm sure you do as well, was especially in meetings, I'd always try and talk last. So I could really listen and try and really understand people's opinion. Because there's a temptation, you want to dive in straight away. But actually the power of listening, not just for yourself, but for others, is incredibly important. So I love that in your style.
It's funny, actually, you say that. You always, I hated that when you did that.
And here I am thinking it was a benefit.
Because it really puts pressure on you having a point of view. So it really forces you to think, because it's like, Andrew's not going to give us anything about what he's thinking. So you're going to have to be honest and open. And I think it's good because it fuels better discussions and more openness. And also, everyone in that room at some point says something and feels like that may not be the right answer. But then everyone gets comfortable with that's okay. They didn't get fired. All is good. And I think it just creates better discussion.
Okay. Building on that. So that's kind of your style. Tell me about a time as an international marketing leader, and you've had a few of those roles, that you were really stretched. And then tell me about how did you steady yourself or your team after being so stretched or in that period?
I'll give you two examples. One is, well, so clearly at Too Good To Go, we went through serious change. So we had constant transformation, that's fine. But then we also had a big transformation, and that was more of a flick of the switch one day in which we essentially changed everyone's job. And it's one thing to hold hands with the operations team and the people and culture team and to really design that, what you believe, better, superior structure. And then it's another to deal with now we have a lot of people with an opinion about what changed structurally, ways of working, the ambiguity, their new role, et cetera, et cetera. And that was tough. So I think I would genuinely have between 10 and 15 one-on-one or meetings the next day. And then for a period of, I would say, months, people would talk about, yeah, but this changed and what does that mean, et cetera, et cetera. But most importantly, any kind of emotion could happen and erupt when that call would start. Someone could be really sad, really angry, really confused. And what it taught me really quickly as a crash course is do not project what you think should happen in this call. Just start with an empty canvas. Listen to our earlier point. Just acknowledge how this person is feeling. And then on the spot, decide how you're going to help that person to get on board with where you need the organization to go. And I think that taught me a lot of things, but one, to just trust yourself that you can listen and you don't need to have a preconceived idea as to where that meeting should go or how it should go. And it's okay either way. And B, you need to really recharge in that 1 minute before closing that Zoom call and starting the next one to really recharge your energy levels, because you can't show up still half dealing with the previous one. And I think after a couple of months of that, I think that's when everything I just talked about building a connection and listening to people and being open and vulnerable and honest, I think training that muscle taught me for it to come naturally, I think. And I think that really helped. If you also look at some of the feedback I got on that period and the team has shared amongst themselves, I think we managed to do that well.
That's a great story. So what I'm hearing is, so your period, it was huge change for everyone in the marketing organization. And that was a big stretch for you. I think it was also when you were relatively new in the role, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was within 6 months.
So just to add that. And you felt yourself quite stretched, but the way you dealt with it was by choosing to be really present, choosing to enter those discussions with complete open mind about just listening for what the person actually needed, with no preconceived objections on what you were going to do, but listening. and then finding the way to help them kind of get on board with the change or deal with the issues they're having. And actually that became your source of power and how you manage that process and manage your own energy. Because you talked a lot about your energy and kind of having that moment to clear and reset between meetings.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that for me was the most, I think when you talk about maturing over a 20-year career period, I think that really gave me a sense of calm. Because you can also then trust yourself that you can go into a meeting and just be composed and calm and trust yourself to say hopefully the right thing, but at least that everyone recognizes it comes from a good place.
Eva, I really love that. I love that for a couple of reasons, because I think, and it's a sign for me of really senior leadership maturity, because it takes a lot of confidence to be able to walk into a room and say, I don't need to control this agenda. I trust myself and I trust the individual will get to where we need to be. I love that because it also releases you. And I also love the fact it releases you to be really present and listen. And that's one of the greatest gifts we can give anybody, to really listen to them and respond to what they're saying, which goes back to your leadership kind of edge and style that you outlined. And because you did that and took the pressure off yourself, it kind of gave you clear energy for the next person as well. So I really love that style. And I think for leaders going through change like that, being able to have the self-confidence to kind of release yourself from that burden and just be present in the moment and trust that that will still get the best possible result is brilliant. Because it will. Because the truth is, if that person leaves the room feeling like they've been really heard and you've responded as best you can to their unique situation, you're 80% of the way there, right? So I think that's a really powerful lesson for other people. Brilliant. All right, let's talk a bit more about this in your leadership development. What's an example when you had to develop really fast? What's a skill or a behavior that you had to develop really fast? So you worked out, oh my God, I don't quite have that. I got to get it fast and I got to get it at a global scale. What's an example of that?
I think everything we just talked about, I think is definitely one of those, where it's like pressure cooker, but with no time, right?
That's true.
And I think the second thing is when you go through all these changes, whether they are more sudden structural changes or just gradual, what tends to happen in these kind of organizations, and you and I have worked together, and I know that you had one where I recall you taking up a Brazil country role in addition to your CMO role. I also had a couple of those where at one point I had 3 roles because there wasn't a person in that job right now. And I think I'm the kind of guy that just does whatever it takes.
Yeah,
and I think everyone recognized it and everyone saw that I worked virtually every waking hour and tried to do its job as good as I could. But I think it also teaches you that the importance of a good team and hiring a good team and investing the time in hiring people, preferably who are smarter than you and better than you, as quickly as possible, and don't get into the trap of, I don't have time.
Yeah.
I think that is such a priority. It's such a pitfall to think, I'll figure it out. Let's not do this interview now. It's like, no, hire ASAP.
Yeah.
And get a good team and empower these people to do the right things, because you're just not going to be able to plug all those holes.
Yeah. And when did you learn that? Because that's critical. I coach a lot of new leaders who are new in role. And this is one of the things we focus on really quick, okay, get in, do your listening to it, understand the company, understand the culture, get clear on your high level strategy, get clear on your structure, and then get your people pronto. And a lot of people find that hard because they're so distracted and they've got bogged in the weeds and they're bogged in a crisis and they think that's the priority. Where did you learn that? When did that become apparent to you? Because that's, as leadership goes, that's a critical thing to understand.
I think I was very aware that having the right people and a quality team that you can trust and that ideally are like I said, better than you are and can really elevate your thinking. I think I realized that quite quickly, certainly when I had to step into some of those roles. I do think it's a gradual burn where you make a few mistakes, where maybe you don't make changes to the team quickly enough. Because it's a fine balance, right? Because if you have to build something from scratch, it's easy. You just bring it, you just hire for the roles, you bring people in. If you have people in place, the timing is very tricky because you're either early or you're late. But
it's true.
So it's you don't want to be early. You don't want to make any decisions that are not the right decisions, frankly, or premature. But equally, you don't want to wait too long because hiring people and filling roles takes time. And I think that's tough. I don't think I have the idea as to, or I have the answer as to this is how you do it. Yeah, if you create new roles, then it's slightly easier. But if you have an existing structure with a lot of people who are capable and willing, it's tough because you are either early or late.
And how do you do that? Because that's a challenge many people face. So how did you approach that?
Well, I think how I operate anyway is marketing is such an interesting role, especially now where you have to work so closely with so many different functions, whether it's finance, whether it's product, whether it's operations, whether it's data and analytics. However you organize, you're going to have a lot of people that have dependencies on you and vice versa. So what I try to do is soundboard as much with people from other functions who maybe are slightly less emotionally invested in people, but have a really good rational experience as to what that role needs in terms of capabilities and personality and drive and seniority, etc. So try to work as much with stakeholders and peers to find out what is the best requirements for this role, knowing that it changes all the time, right? Because it might be perfect 6 months ago, and then 6 months later, it's like, we might need something else. It's just super.
That's true. I love that point about, and again, I think that's a sign of there's a proper C-suite marketing leader where you've got the confidence to go to your peers in other functions and talk through these challenges and get their view and their input. And having the confidence to do that is incredibly powerful because you get much better inputs, you get much better decisions, and they buy into it. So you don't have to kind of fight to force these things through. So I think, again, that's a really good characteristic. How quickly do you do that? You talked about there's never a right time. It's either too fast or too late. When you started a new role, how quickly do you try and address those issues? Like, do you have some kind of a plan when you start about by when you're going to address these, or is it very organic?
I don't, because I try to be open-minded and not just go in thinking I need to bring in my own lieutenants or bring in these kind of people. I think you give everyone a chance to grow and develop. I always think, well, we as a company, and I stand by it as an individual, try to optimize for humble and hungry. And if you have people who are humble and hungry, you can learn skills, right? And you can learn capabilities, and you can learn about technology, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're humble and hungry, you're going to pick those things up. And I think if people have that profile, you'll go a long way in working with them to make sure that we get to wherever we need to.
Correct. I love that. I love that. Humble and hungry. And I love that because it resonates with me. So when I hire, I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, I look for capital T, lowercase e, capital C. So the capital T is talent. Do they have the raw talent? C is cultural fit. Are they a real cultural fit with this organization? If they have those two things, the experience is not so important because you can teach experience and you can guide and you can support. But talent and raw cultural fit are critically important. And it sounds a bit like kind of humble and hungry in terms of your...
And resilience, I think.
Yeah.
If they're not going to be faced by change or faced by changing goalposts and having to learn and dig in. I think resilience is super, super important, and will probably only become more important as technology life cycles are so fast now.
That's brilliant. So I'm going to jump straight to that. Thank you for that setup, because I agree with you. I think resilience is the new superpower in marketing, especially for leadership, right? Because we are at a time in marketing where things are changing faster than we can imagine. We've got technology changing with AI. We've got really complex tech stacks. We've got marketing being fragmented. Everything is changing quite rapidly. And the business context is also, we've never seen it before, right? We've got an incredible change in the geopolitical structure. We've got a crisis in consumer confidence around the world. We've got energy crisis. I mean, it couldn't get more complicated than it is right now. So resilience is critical. Tell me about your resilience, because again, in that environment and in scale ups and with all the change, resilience is critical. What are your keys to creating and maintaining your own resilience first, and then to creating a team that's resilient and can maintain resilience? How do you do that? Because you must have done that.
Yeah, I think the thing that I try to do to just maintain a degree of sanity in a work week that is pretty intense and you keep jumping up and down from one topic to another. It's going to sound quite corny, but I think my daughter is like my anchor. So the one thing that is a non-negotiable for me is breakfast with my daughter. When I'm in the country, that is, the morning routine, whether it's from 6 to 8, to just, we know exactly what we need. So she just turned 9. She doesn't want people to talk to her in the morning. I won't talk to her, but I'll make her breakfast and I'll know exactly what facial expressions to look for in order to understand what she wants. And that really puts everything in perspective. And then similarly, after work, between 6 and 8, the dinner time and bedtime period, I think that just calms everything down. And those 2 blocks really help me have perspective, but also just fuel a bit of creativity in my brain for all of the other hours that are basically going to either sleep or work.
Fantastic.
I think it's super important to me.
Right. So it's having a real anchor there in terms of someone or something that's more important for you, so you can switch off from the other stuff. So that anchor in the morning and night for you, which is your daughter.
And it was actually quite, because with time zones, it's very easy to get sucked into morning calls, right? And I had to learn to say, you know what? No, man, I'm calling the shots here. And until 8 a.m., I'm not doing calls. Because also, if you want to go to the office, I live in London, so if you want to go to the office, all of a sudden it's like an hour's commute. You need to leave at like 6:45. So I really protected that time slot.
I love it. Because you're right. As a CMO, especially an international CMO, there is no, if you let it, you'd be on every minute of every day, right? Because when you wake up, another country's going to bed. When you're going to bed, another country's waking up, and it's you chase the timeline the entire day. So I think those routines and those non-negotiables are critical. Tell me, was that something that came naturally, setting those boundaries, or did you struggle with setting those boundaries? How did you get there?
Yeah, I struggled. I recognized quite quickly that when in the evening you go to bed and your daughter's lying next to you and the rhythmic breathing or whatever, that basically anything that you might be stressed over, it would be put into perspective and make me a lot calmer. So I realized that quite quickly, but then I didn't protect it. And certainly in the first year and a half it took it to go, so that means the first 19 years of my career, I didn't feel comfortable with saying, no, I will reject this call at 7:30. This doesn't work for me. I had to really learn that it's okay to put some boundaries in place.
And how did you get to that learning? Because that is again, I coach a lot of marketing leaders, and that's a key point. right? Drawing those boundaries and being comfortable with that is a key milestone that changes everything. How did you get there? I'm really clear that you have your daughter who's you value your time with her above all else, and that was critical. But how did you had your daughter for some of those other 19 years? So
Yeah.
how did you get to that point where you went, no, this is the line from now on, I change it?
I think just a bit of confidence and also learning that, well, first of all, Too Good To Go has got quite a good culture in terms of work-life balance. So they were very accepting of that reality. And then I think also just finding by setting the block and then no one has a panic attack and no one freaks out. I think that helps. You do get the odds. Oh, but this is an exception. It's only once. It's like, yeah, it's only once by 130 people, which still
exactly
is every day. And I think just learning that it's okay. And if you piss someone off, then so be it. I also now have a bit more. I recognize that my time is more valuable and better spent if I'm actually refreshed and have energy to give and have any intellectual capacity. It's probably a better version of me than me joining a call as a zombie.
Yeah, exactly. I think they're great learnings. So your point is having a really important reason was one, which is your daughter. Having the confidence to say no. And also being really clear, when you're happy and healthy and energized, you're much better in service of those around you than being exhausted and trying to keep up. I think that's great. I want to share with you, are you aware of Viktor Frankl?
Nope.
Viktor Frankl was a German psychologist who survived 3 concentration camps, including Auschwitz. And he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He talks about resilience in that. And in that, he talks about resilience being able to turn adversity into personal growth. And one of his critical things in being able to overcome the harshest adversity is finding meaning in your suffering. And that is one of the reasons is finding service in other people, a bit like your daughter, putting your service to other people above all else. And that being kind of the way to overcome this and turn any adversity in kind of not such a big deal by having real purpose and meaning in serving someone else. And I hear that a bit with your daughter, but also yourself, and also in serving the people you lead by being in better shape for them. So, there's a fun fact for you. But if you haven't read that book, read that book, Man's Search for Meaning. It's amazing. And I want to talk about imposter syndrome. I've heard you talk about this before. And the reason I want to bring it up is because the reality is I coach lots of CMOs, especially new CMOs, and mainly in international roles like yours. And the fact is the best CMOs in the world all suffer from this. They don't like to admit it, but they all suffer from it periodically, right? It's not all the time, especially when you're new, it's much, much bigger because you're kind of desperately trying to understand an organization. You're trying to find your own style. You're trying to appease different factions in different countries and different functions. It's coming at you from everywhere. Have you ever suffered from imposter syndrome? And if so, how did you deal with that?
Yes, and badly, I think.
Welcome to the club.
I think it's funny, actually. So I have a coach and we talk about this quite a lot. So imposter syndrome was definitely the first topic we tried to tackle. Try to being the operative word. Yeah, it's tough, right? And I'm sure I don't want to project my personality onto other people, but I'm sure what I'm going to say is not unique to me. I always seek a challenge, and preferably a difficult challenge or a complex challenge. And if I can't find it, then I get bored. And then on the other hand, when I then have the challenge, I feel I'm not worthy and I get imposter syndrome. So it's a really annoying paradox or juxtaposition because it's like you make it really hard for yourself and then you think you believe you're not worthy. And that voice in your head is pretty annoying. So I wouldn't say I've dealt with it. I'm quite open about it, so that helps. And then I think the most valuable lesson I got from my coach and through a book that she recommended which is called something like Tame Your Inner Gremlin, I think, is you learn to recognize and notice the voice. And when you can notice it and recognize, hold on a minute, this is me trying to talk to myself and to talk me into something negative. And if you can recognize that as your voice, then you also have a choice to engage with it or not. And I think that awareness of the voice is super important. But then talk about consumer-centric marketing, right? So it's your voice who knows you. You know yourself better than anyone. So that voice is really, really good at persuasive communication and saying exactly what you need to hear in order to get dragged down into a negative spiral. So it's tough, but I think just being aware that it is your inner voice and try to make a decision, an active decision as to do I engage with this or not. I think that is the key thing. But I haven't solved it, but it helps, I think.
Bravo. Thank you for being so honest about that, because a lot of people don't like talking about that. I share the same. I've had imposter syndrome my whole career, still do, as I pivot careers. It never goes away. And when I coach people, that's one of the things I talk about is the goal is not to make the voice go away. It's always going to be there, but it's to try and make it a force for good instead of a force that undermines you. And your point about the awareness and recognizing it's there and making choices is really important. But I think this is really important because imposter syndrome, actually, I think if it can be harnessed as something for good, it's one of the greatest drivers of our success, right? As you said, it's that juxtaposition between I want the challenge, oh my God. I want the challenge, oh my God. And it's sometimes it's that voice that drives us as well. So I think it's a really beautiful articulation what you just shared. So thank you for sharing that.
I think if I can have a build on the use it as a force for good, I think if you can use it as part of a responsible mindset, where you think in any given situation, if you reflect on it and think, what could I have done better or differently in order to achieve a better outcome? I think a responsible mindset, not a lot of people talk about it, but it's such an underutilized source of learning.
Explain that to me. What is a responsible mindset? I love that, but I've never heard that before. Explain that to me.
So a responsible mindset, and apologies for whoever coined this phrase, and I'm going to butcher it. I think you've got two options when something happens and it doesn't go the way you want it to go. You can either think a bit like a victim and think if this happened, it's really annoying, oh gosh, and I was a victim in this situation. Or you can apply and think, but what could I have done differently to achieve a different outcome that was better? And I think, and what I really like about that mindset is you don't have to wait until something goes wrong, right? So you don't have to wait to the dumpster fire or something blowing up in your face. You can reflect on valuable meetings. You can reflect on board meetings, management meetings, any conversation, and to then reflect and to say, what did I do? How could I have done this better? And without being super fatalistic about it, I think there's a lot of learnings there to be had. I also don't want to encourage that everyone goes into a second guessing, endless reflection cycle. But it's a great opportunity to constantly develop yourself and to grow, right?
Yeah, I love that. I'd never heard that term before, but I love it. And I love what you're saying, because what I think you're saying is don't just use that when things go wrong. Use it when things go right. Because that's a lovely muscle and behavior to build constantly, which can be a real source of strength. In fact, what you really make me think of, we work for some Chinese companies who practiced open self-reflection, right? Our leadership actively, formally practice self-reflection. And it kind of reminds me of that, which was at the time an incredibly foreign concept, but incredibly powerful to publicly practice that reflection. Not always good, but it's
but
behavior.
I think that's a really good well, to make the link to the Chinese cultures that we worked in, I think very similarly, you can look at those cultures and think, wow, this is really alien. There's a lot of things that are really uncomfortable. This is not how I grew up and what I was taught when I was younger. But I think you saw it in the companies that we worked at, the people who flourished were the people who embraced it and said, there's some really powerful principles here. So I think the one thing I took away from working in a Chinese culture is, if a good decision is the right decision, then regardless how hard it is to implement it, take it.
Yeah.
And because I remember we would organize events with like 5,000 people, and there's permits and there's a lot of operations that come with it. And then someone would question, it's like, what if we don't do it in Paris, but we do it in Berlin? And I think in Western European cultures, everyone would freak out and have a panic attack. And it's like, unless we've got 12 months, we should not even entertain this. But it's when you then go through a couple of those cycles and then you find out afterwards that it was fine. You made the decision. You can do far more than you think you can. And the sky really, truly is the limit. And if something is the right decision, then take the right decision. I think is really, really liberating, I think, when you open up to it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love the couple of points you made there about embracing things that feel really uncomfortable in different cultures, whether that's Chinese or a different business. They're actually incredibly powerful, both in terms of that reflection, but also that point you just made about being able to pivot and adapt so quickly, right? And I remember back to one of those companies. This is my biggest learning from that was I remember my boss, who Walter G, called me after about 3 months and said, Andrew, we need to chat. You're driving us crazy. I think we're driving you crazy. And it was exactly that. And he said, you're really well trained in marketing. You'll spend 3 or 6 months planning it and it'll be great. But we're different. We believe there's no right answer and no one can have all the answers. And we got to keep challenging things right till the last minute because there might be a better answer. And if we find it, we got to do it. And it drives you crazy because you had this big plan and now we got to change everything. So I remember that vividly. But like you said, when you lean into that, even though it feels impossible, the results are incredible. So I love that part. Drawing on things that feel uncomfortable, which again is probably going back to some of your leadership style, actually. We're nearly out of time. I want to touch on a couple of things. I want to get back to resilience for a second. We talked about some of your strategies for resilience, which was having something really important to focus on that gives everything else kind of context, about looking after yourself so you can look after others. How do you build resilience for your team? How do you build a team culture so the team can be resilient? Because maintaining your resilience is critical, but you also, as an international leader or a leader in any context, you have a responsibility to build resilience into your team and into your culture. How do you go about doing that?
I mean, it's a great question. I don't know if I have the answer, but I think being open and honest about expectations and that stuff is going to be changing. And when I talk about recalibrating expectations and a dynamic environment, just be very clear that that's what it's going to be like so that when it happens, people aren't surprised. And then I always think if I am open and honest about it, and if I'm vulnerable myself about what that does to me, and how sometimes that can feel a bit annoying, and sometimes that can feel a bit frustrating, and sometimes that gives me more questions than answers, then hopefully other people on my team will trickle that down the organization. Because if they see me be vulnerable, if they see me be open, and then they do the same with their teams, then I believe that surely will lead to better discussions, more open questions. Instead of people struggling by themselves in the toilet, they're now struggling in the open and discussing it and trying to find solutions. And I think having those open discussions just fuels better outcomes. And I think also embracing conflicting viewpoints. So it's very easy to get set in certain meetings or certain forums, or certain steercos, where you surround yourself with the same people and the same formats and the same decks.
So true.
So there's a whole host of inputs and questions and challenges that don't enter that conversation because they're not part of the template or the format or the structure. To try and change things regularly so that you surround yourself and you open yourself up to viewpoints that might actually conflict with what you think is right. And then apply that mindset in which you think, hold on, what wasn't I seeing earlier? What this person is telling me. Don't think you're wrong, that's frustrating, but think, what am I missing? And then you're able to take better decisions. And again, that trickles down, et cetera, et cetera. Sounds great, but I think that's how I think about it. It's what I try to apply.
Really, I love that. I think it comes back to, as I hear you say that, there's two things that come to top of mind for me as I hear you say that. One is this idea of radical transparency as a leader. It's one of the things I talk about for managing a crisis. One of the things, the critical is just radical transparency. Don't hide anything. And I also love your point about, again, you talked about it in your leadership style, but you mentioned it again there around authenticity and really listening. And I love the fact that you took it even further about having a real awareness and trigger about, maybe things are forming around me in a set way and it's time to change it up so I don't miss it. I think that's really powerful because I've made that mistake many times, right? Because the organization starts to shape to the way you like to do things.
Yeah.
Even if you're a great listener, everybody learns your style and starts to shape to your style. So actually, I think that flexibility and adaptability coupled with your listening and your authenticity and transparency is really vital ingredients. I love that. In fact, I'm going to take that from you and use it in the future.
I think there's a quote around architecture around this where they say, we shape the buildings and then the buildings shape us.
I've never heard that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's the same with processes and formats, etc. Right? And if you have the presence of mind to change it when you feel like, oh God, I'm starting to get wedged into this system and there's a lot of things that we're not seeing anymore. To then be able to say, let's mix it up, let's change it. That also trains a muscle for the rest of the team. And do it when it goes well. Do it when things are positive.
It's much easier. Much easier. Yeah. Right. We're running out of time. I want to jump into some, actually, I was going to do some practical questions, but I'll save that for another day. I want to get back to kind of your advice, because you've had a fantastic journey, and I've been lucky to be part of that journey. As you said, starting from a PR specialist, you filled up your backpack with lots of different experience in lots of different parts of the marketing mix. You've gone on to become an incredibly successful international CMO. What's your what's your recommendations or your suggestions in terms of things to do for aspiring CMOs? There's a lot of CMOs out there that, might have their first country role, or they may not even have a CMO role yet, but they really want one of those big international CMO roles. What's your advice for them? What are the things you would tell them to do?
Yeah, I think one thing I tend to say is be the architect of your own happiness. So try to figure out what kind of role you would like to do. And no one knows this, right? It's all theoretical and hypothetical, but at least try to figure out what kind of CMO you want to be, what kind of role you're looking for, and then design the path to get there. Again, with the realization that you're basically relying on opportunities and the universe to fall into place. So it's more chance than design. But I think back yourself to say, these are the areas that I think I need to develop in order to become good at what I do, grow into the role that I would like to do, and be comfortable with who I am as per the imposter syndrome. And then make it happen to the best of your ability, but also be okay with if the path that you've laid out isn't exactly going to be the path. I think that's probably one. And then the other is, as the role of a modern day marketer is so varied and so broad, and we have to work with operations and customer experience and product and tech and finance and data and analytics and all of these functions. If you are currently not already working and interfacing with those functions, start doing that as much as possible now. Start trying to see the world from their vantage point. Start trying to understand their challenges and be absolutely forensic about how the business works. I think all of the stuff that we've just talked for however long, and we've talked about everything except marketing.
That's true.
And I think someone in another podcast asked me, how much marketing do you do? And my soundbite didn't quite come out well because I think it sounded like I didn't do any marketing, which I think is wrong. But I often say my week is kind of made up of 50% of my work week goes to leadership and to all the stuff that we just talked about. 50% of the work week goes to strategic direction, vision, and marketing, what needs to be done. And then 50% of my work week goes to the guiding the operations and execution and making sure that you raise the bar on quality, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't need to be a mathematician. That's 150% of the work week. But I think if you're going to spend that much time outside of the field of marketing, then the best prep is to invest in understanding the world outside of marketing.
Amazing. I love that. Anything else? That's gold. Anything else?
Yeah, if you're not present in meetings now, maybe start doing that. But that's mainly because you told me that however many years ago when you told everyone to close their laptops in a meeting, and we wouldn't start until people had done that, which I thought was such a valuable life lesson.
Wonderful. Obviously, I'm sold on that. But yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna summarize that. There were three big points you made there. One is, the first point was about setting your vision clearly, mapping out what that looks like, and being okay with the fact it probably has to change a lot. It won't follow the perfect path. The second one was competence beyond marketing. I love that. I think that is really, really critical. And again, in a lot of work I do, that's the big change from a marketing expert to a true C-suite leader, right? When you're a C-suite leader, you're leading as a business leader across business. Marketing just happens to be your accountability, but you're leading across the entire business. And if you can't understand the business, you don't really deserve to be in the C-suite. It's my opinion. And so I think your advice there is excellent. And again, be present. I'm a massive, massive fan of that. I think it speaks volumes about the people around you that you're giving them that time. And it just makes things way more powerful. So I love that. I also want to pick up another point you said that I think is really important. The point that what we're actually talking about here is great leadership in many respects. And a great CMO is actually a great leader who just happens to be accountable for marketing. And you need all that marketing expertise, but actually you need to be an incredible leader across the business. And I think, Ivo, full credit to you. I think you are one of those leaders, and it's been the greatest privilege to watch you from afar as you just get more and more successful. And I count myself as doing one of the things you said, hiring talent that's way smarter than you. Which is brilliant because you've done, I'm so proud of where you've got to and what you've done. And a huge thank you for your time today and sharing your insights. I think it's really, really valuable. And it's just my hope that people listening to this can learn from that and add it to their rucksack, as you put it, or backpack, as they develop their career. Before we wrap up today, is there any closing thoughts you'd like to share with aspiring marketing leaders or people who may already be in their first international role in that oh shit phase when we all first start? Any words of wisdom you want to share in closing?
Yeah, I think the biggest, so I stepped away from 2 years ago, I think in summer, to spend a bit more quality time with my family. And one of the biggest reflections I had about what would I have done better because I applied a responsible mindset, is it's super easy in those roles, especially because you're so overwhelmed and there's so much going on. It's super easy to just go head down, tunnel vision, singular focus, and to just be all in on that business, which is amazing and commendable. And don't get me wrong, I think that's definitely what I did. And probably the one thing I didn't do enough of whilst in that role is take the time to actively go out there and speak to peers, speak to other CMOs, find them, join groups, join network events, etc., etc. Make the time, because if anything, if you're saying, hey, is anyone else struggling with this MMM malarkey? And I'm really trying to instill incrementality measurement as a mindset for my teams on the ground in Germany. And to then hear another CMO saying, yep, same. So nice that when you talk about imposter syndrome, to just get the validation that this stuff is hard.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I think as someone who also made that mistake and ashamedly, more than once, I couldn't agree more. I have a saying that we're not meant to do this alone, right? We're just not meant to. And to your point, everyone is having the same issues, right? Might be slightly different context, it might be different issues at different times, but everybody is struggling. There's very few, I haven't met anyone that's got it nailed yet because it's such a complex challenge that we face today. I love that advice. I think as a closing piece of advice, I think that's just brilliant. One more thing to ask you. If you were to gift somebody a leadership book, what would it be?
Yes, so controversial answer. Not much of a reader.
Not controversial at all. Wow, that's true. You're very authentic and very consistent.
So I'm not much of a reader, so I'm not going to say Thinking Fast and Slow. I'm going to recommend a podcast if that's okay. Apart from yours, obviously, in addition to yours. It would be a podcast called The Knowledge Project Podcast.
Oh, I don't know that. I'm going to write that.
By a guy called Shane Parish.
Mm-hmm.
He's a New York Times bestselling author, and he has incredible guests on his podcast. So you'll have like the former CEO of PepsiCo, who's an amazing lady. I have a quote from her, which I love, about work-life balance, and said, okay, we need to stop talking about work-life balance. There is no balance. There's barely harmony.
That's true. It's true. I love that.
Which I thought was such a brilliant quote. It's like, you wasn't even entertaining it. But yeah, the Knowledge Project podcast is my recommended listen. Sorry, it's not a book.
Brilliant. No, it's fine. Doesn't need to be a book. I love that. I will definitely listen to that. All right. On that note, Eva, I've taken a lot of your time. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, sharing your views on leadership, sharing some of your successes and some of your approaches to common leadership and marketing problems. I'm very, very grateful, and I'm sure people listening will get incredible value out of that. So thank you again.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for taking the time. And hopefully see you soon outside of the podcast blog.
Yes, hopefully. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you for listening to The Global Marketing Leader. And a big thank you to Ivo Vandenbrand for joining me. I hope this conversation has given you a clearer view of what it takes to lead international marketing teams through constant change, and a reminder that you can learn the skills, you can build resilience, and you can do more than you think you can. If you found this useful, please follow the show, leave a review, and share this episode with another marketing leader that you respect. It really helps us reach more people. If you are a CMO or a senior marketing leader and you would like support to accelerate your leadership and build a stronger global team, you can find out more about my coaching and leadership programs at cmocoach.co. Until next time, keep accelerating your leadership and elevating your impact.